Every day, dozens of footsteps echoed in front of that old boarding house, a silent building with shuttered windows and walls that seemed to bear the weight of time. But no one ever dared cross that door, always locked, always shrouded in an unsettling silence. Some said it was simply abandonment. Others swore they heard muffled cries at nightfall. The truth was even darker. Behind that door lay a secret that would make the entire city tremble. A secret so painful that they chose to forget it. And yet it was precisely there that lay hidden the saddest story that city had ever known. The guest house sat on a narrow cobblestone street. The uneven sidewalks bore the marks of many generations who had passed through. The wooden windows, worn by wind and rain, had peeling paint, revealing the raw tone of time. And yet, even with so many scars, the building held a quiet grandeur. It was as if every crack in the walls had something to say, as if every detail bore witness to a life that would never return. For a long time, that space was synonymous with life. Inside, loud laughter echoed. Travelers' hurried footsteps echoed, and children ran through the narrow hallways. The smell of fresh coffee filled the mornings and mingled with the warm bread baking in the oven. Each room held different stories, unlikely encounters, midnight confessions, whispered promises of love. It was indeed a home where strangers became family, and at the center of it all was her, the owner of the boarding house. A woman with sweet eyes, hands calloused from work, and a heart that seemed bigger than the walls that supported that house. For her, that place wasn't just brick, wood, and cement. No, for her, that boarding house was a piece of her very soul. It was a home. It was the reflection of her effort, her struggle, and above all, her love for people. She had the rare gift of making anyone feel at home. All it took was a smile, a hot meal on the table, a silent ear on difficult days. Many travelers said they didn't just find a roof over their heads there. They found shelter for their souls. And perhaps that was what made the guest house so special. It wasn't just a physical place, but an experience, a memory that remained etched in the hearts of those who passed through. But time, relentless, began to take away the hustle and bustle of that street. The shops closed, the travelers changed their route, and the joy that once pulsed within the boarding house gradually gave way to silence. The laughter was replaced by hollow echoes. The smell of fresh coffee no longer filled the mornings. The curtains remained closed, and the hallways grew colder and colder. And that's when people started to notice. What had once been a welcoming space now felt like a ghost house. The windows no longer opened. The lights rarely came on. What had happened in there? Why had that woman so full of life suddenly closed herself off from the world? Some said it was loneliness. Others that he had suffered an irreparable loss. And there were still those who claimed to hear, in the silence of the early morning, a muffled cry coming from inside. But no one dared ask. No one had the courage to cross that locked door. And so the boarding house transformed from a welcoming home into a dark mystery. But the truth was even more painful than anyone could imagine. Because behind that door, where dust accumulated and time seemed to have stopped, lay the saddest story, and at the same time, the most forgotten story of that city. And it is precisely this story that you will learn now. But little by little, the house began to fill with silence. What had once been synonymous with life now became a space where the air seemed heavy, where time seemed to pass too slowly. The lady received fewer and fewer guests. The bedroom doors remained closed, the hallways echoing only with the sound of her own footsteps, shuffling, solitary. What had once been a bustling home was slowly transforming into a dusty portrait of its former self. And the neighbors, oh, the neighbors. They watched every day the transformation unfold before their eyes. That iron gate, which once opened early in the morning to welcome travelers, remained closed for days on end. The curtains, once opened to let the sun illuminate the worn walls, were forever drawn. They looked like tired eyes, no longer wanting to see the world outside. And the lights, they rarely came on. At night, the boarding house blended into the darkness of the street, as if it wanted to disappear. No one dared knock on that door. No one had the courage to ask if she needed anything. The silence was so intense it was frightening, because it wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a heavy silence, a silence that screamed without words. And it was on a cold afternoon, when the wind bit the skin and fog shrouded the narrow street, that a muffled scream echoed through those walls. It was no ordinary scream. It was no call for help. It was a stifled, painful sound, as if one's very soul were being torn apart. Everyone passing by in that moment froze in fear. Eyes met, but no one approached. The scream was swallowed by the silence of the house, as if it had never existed. But everyone knew they had heard it. From that day on, the boarding house ceased to be merely a mystery. It became a place to be avoided. Children were forbidden from playing nearby, and older people made the sign of the cross as they passed. People began to invent stories, trying to explain the inexplicable. Some said the woman had gone mad. Others believed spirits roamed the hallways. But there were also those who claimed that pain had taken up residence in that house. An invisible pain, yet present in every crack, in every shadow, in every suffocating silence. And indeed, that's what it seemed. The once smiling lady no longer came out to greet her neighbors. She no longer lit the lamp that illuminated her porch. She no longer baked the warm bread that filled the street with aroma. She had shut herself away, as if harboring a secret too heavy to share. The few who still remembered her fondly said her gaze had changed. Before there had been sweetness. Now there was an emptiness no one could decipher. A silent abyss, as if she carried within herself an irreparable loss. A deep mourning, hidden behind those peeling walls and that perpetually locked door. No one dared ask about it, because deep down everyone knew the answer could be too painful. And so the mystery grew. What happened in there? What could have made that woman so full of life turn into a shadow? What secret was she hiding behind those walls that now seemed to breathe sadness? With each day, curiosity grew, but along with it, fear also grew. Because sometimes it's easier to live with silence than to face the truth it hides. Time passed, and the boarding house became a legend. Story whispered from generation to generation. No one knew for sure what had happened, but everyone agreed on one thing. Behind that closed door, there was something the town wasn't ready to discover. Until one stormy night, the truth came to light. The rain fell heavily, as if the sky wanted to wash every stone of that ancient street. Thunder tore through the silence of the early morning, and lightning momentarily illuminated the boarding house's aging facade. The door, which had remained closed for years, was ajar. The wind made the hinges creak, and the sound echoed through the street like a strange, almost supernatural call. The neighbors, frightened, looked at each other through the cracks in their windows. No one dared to go outside. There was an inexplicable fear, but also an irresistible curiosity. What was happening inside? Who had opened that door after so long? The mystery surrounding the house seemed to finally give way to the force of the storm. And that was when some men from the neighborhood, summoning courage they didn't know they had, crossed the street. The iron gate creaked as if resisting being touched. They pushed the door open slowly, and a thick smell of dust and damp wood invaded their lungs. The main room was plunged in darkness, lit only by the flashes of the storm. The furniture covered in sheets, the worn floor, the crooked pictures on the walls, everything seemed frozen in time. But there was something stronger than the decay, an atmosphere of pain. It was as if the walls were silently weeping. Every detail screamed a nameless absence. The air was heavy, dense, and no one could take more than 2 steps without feeling a tightness in their chest. The house seemed alive, or rather it seemed wounded, until at the end of the hallway they found the door to the oldest room in the boarding house. The wood was marked by time, but unlike the others, it wasn't covered in dust. It was as if someone entered every day. Everyone's hearts raced, and when they finally pushed open the door, the silence was replaced by a profound shock. The room remained intact, untouched, as if it had been preserved with almost sacred care. Clothes were folded on a chair, toys rested on shelves, and the bed. The bed was made, sheets straightened, waiting for someone who would never return. On the nightstand, a small framed picture of a boy's smile, the son she had lost years ago. In that moment, everyone understood. During all that time, preserved the lady detail, as if time had stopped on the day of her farewell. The room wasn't just a memory. It was a way of keeping alive what had been taken from her. It was the silent altar of a love that never ceased to exist. Some residents couldn't hold back their tears. Others simply stood motionless, speechless. It was as if they had invaded a sacred place, a space that didn't belong to them. Because it wasn't just a room, it was the story of a mother who couldn't say goodbye. It was the open wound that explained the silence of the boarding house, the closed curtains, the pain that spread through the hallways. There, in the darkness, they realized that the real storm was not outside, but inside that house. A storm that had consumed the days and nights of a woman who, even broken, refused to forget. The muffled scream the neighbors had heard years before was the scream of a mother who could not bear the emptiness. The silence that filled the boarding house was the echo of a son's absence. And in that untouched room, in the middle of the rainy dawn, everyone understood. The boarding house's secret wasn't a ghost nor madness. It was love. A love so deep it turned into eternal pain. A love so strong it froze time within its 4 walls. A love that made that house not a home, but a silent memorial. But what no one knew is that beyond the preserved memories, there was something more. Small hidden details, fragments of a story that would reveal even more about that mother and about the son she never stopped loving. But alongside the emptiness, there was something no one expected. In that room, so pristine and silent, one detail seemed out of place. At the bottom of the desk drawer, Carefully folded and hidden among cloths were letters. Old letters written in a youthful handwriting, a little shaky, but full of life. They were from him, from the son she had lost years ago. The hands that opened those pages hesitated. The paper, already yellowed, age exuded the bittersweet scent of memory. Each envelope bore different dates, as if they were pieces of a secret diary. And as the first page was unfurled, the silence of the room was broken by words that seemed to still pulse with life. These weren't words of pain, but of love. They weren't goodbyes, but gratitude. He wrote to his mother as if leaving a compass so she wouldn't get lost after a storm. In every line there was tenderness, there was affection, there was the certainty that, even far away, he wanted to stay close. One of the letters said, "Mom, thank you for every smile you gave me. Thank you for every night you stayed awake, silently caring for me. I know the world can be hard, but with you, it always seemed lighter. If one day I'm no longer here, I want you to continue being who you always were. The woman who turns any house into a home, any pain into a welcome, any loneliness into companionship." In another letter, written with even more fragile lines, "Mother, continue caring for others, just as you always cared for me, because that is your gift, that is your purpose. Don't let longing close the doors of your heart. Love doesn't end with absence. It multiplies." And in that moment, everyone understood. That room wasn't just a reflection of endless grief. It wasn't just a space frozen in time. It was also the guardian of a silent mission. Every detail preserved, every object kept in its place, wasn't just resistance. Pain, it was the mother's way of keeping alive the hope her son had left in words. And it was then that the city understood. The boarding house was never just a house. It was never just walls, windows, and hallways. It was the last refuge of a son's memory, transformed into a silent mission of love. Because deep down, each guest who passed through there wasn't just welcomed with hot coffee and a made bed. They were welcomed with the same affection she had given her son, the same care, the same attention, the same heart that refused to let love die. Those letters changed everything. What once seemed like madness now revealed courage. What once seemed like endless sadness now revealed infinite love. The woman hadn't just lost herself in grief. She had transformed grief into purpose. She guarded her son's room, yes, but at the same time she made space within herself to continue caring for others as an echo of what he had asked for. And the people who had judged so long for began to look at it with different eyes. It was no longer a place of mystery. It was no longer a space of darkness. It was a temple of silent love, a testament to the strength of a mother who refused to let grief erase the memory of the one who had departed. That night, under the rain that still fell outside, everyone understood something greater. The boarding house wasn't locked out of fear. It was guarded by love. A love that didn't find its end in death. A love that reinvented itself in letters and gestures and silence. A love that, even suffocated by absence, became a legacy. The locked door didn't just hide sadness. It hid the purest form of love. A love that withstood time, absence, and silence. A love that didn't allow itself to be buried by loss, but found a way to remain alive even amidst the pain. And that night, as the storm descended on the city, everyone realized something they had never seen before. The saddest story, the one that had been avoided, was actually the most beautiful memory of someone who never ceased to exist in her mother's heart. Every object kept, every detail preserved, every hidden letter, all of it was proof that love, when true, knows no boundaries. Not even death can erase it. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is just a different way of continuing to love. Sometimes the silence we think is loneliness is just a heart trying to protect what little remains of an unbreakable bond. And how many times have we looked at someone and thought we knew what was going on inside their soul, when in truth we don't even know half the story? In that city for years the boarding house was seen as a somber place, but deep down it was a sanctuary. Not a temple made of marble and stained glass, but of memories and affection. It was a mother's silent way of keeping her bond with her son alive, obeying, without anyone knowing, his final request: to continue caring, to continue loving, to continue being who she always was. And perhaps looking at this story, we can also ask ourselves, how many locked doors are there around us? How many people carry invisible pain, transforming silence into a shelter for what they cannot share? How many smiles hide losses? How many glances hold goodbyes? Life is short, and often we only realize someone's worth when it's too late. But this story reminds us that love doesn't need to be lost in haste, oblivion, or distance. It can and should be demonstrated and celebrated in life. Because when the time comes to say goodbye, what remains are not material possessions, but the memories, gestures, and affection we leave in the hearts of those we love. The boarding house, which for so long was a symbol of mystery and pain, ended up becoming a lesson for the entire city. A lesson that even suffering can transform into purpose, and that the greatest legacy we can leave is the love we sow in others. And that's why this story isn't just about a mother and her son. It's about all of us, about how we cope with loss, about how we hold on to our memories, and about how, even in the face of pain, we can find a way to keep loving.